The Harrington family had been planning their summer getaway for months. Julia Harrington, ever the organizer, had circled the dates on the kitchen calendar in bright red ink. Her husband, Mark, had been too buried in work to think much about it, but their 7-year-old son, Evan, had been bouncing with excitement ever since he saw the commercials on TV. Mirrorland Theme Park, the ad said, promising a place where dreams come true and the fun never ends. The drive was long, but Evan's chatter filled the car with warmth. The park loomed on the horizon like a castle from a fairy tale, its spires glittering in the sun. But as they approached, Julia felt something stir uneasily in her stomach. The parking lot was huge, yet strangely quiet, the air unnaturally still. A pale mist clung to the edges of the grounds, even though it was midsummer. Mark laughed it off, chalking it up to nerves, and soon they were through the turnstiles, handed glossy maps by attendants who smiled a little too wide. Their eyes were glassy, unfocused, as though they were looking through them rather than at them. Julia shivered, but Evan didn't notice. He pulled them toward the first ride. Mirrorland was dazzling at first. The rides ran smoothly. The shows sparkled with colors that seemed almost too bright. Cotton candy melted like clouds on their tongues. But beneath the surface of perfection, Julia kept catching little things. The same song playing on a loop, the same man sweeping the same spot over and over. Employees stood like statues when they thought no one was looking. Their smiles never faltered, even when a balloon popped right next to them. Mark began to notice too. "Weird place," he muttered. "Too perfect." It was after the house of mirrors that Evan vanished. One moment he was laughing at his warped reflection, and the next he was gone, the hallways bending and twisting like a living maze. Julia and Mark called his name until their throats were raw, but there was only their own echo. Security was called, but the guards seemed oddly calm. "Children wander here sometimes," one said with a dreamy tone. "They always turn up. No urgency, no radios crackling to life, just a slow blink and a too-wide grin." Julia's hands trembled. "No, you don't understand. He's 7. He's terrified." But the guard only nodded, as if he hadn't heard her at all. "We'll keep an eye out." And he walked away, whistling a strange tune that made the hairs on her neck stand up. They searched every corner they could reach. The rides, the shows, the endless food stands. The crowd seemed to thin unnaturally as dusk fell. Yet the park stayed open, bathed in a twilight glow that never fully turned to night. Julia felt the air grow heavier, the colors too vivid, the laughter of the remaining guests distorted, like a recording played backward. Mark grabbed her hand. "We're finding him. We're not leaving without him." Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed, but it wasn't Evan. The deeper they went, the stranger the park became. Areas not on the map appeared narrow alleys between attractions, rides with no names, doors leading to dark corridors where the music warped into something discordant. A woman selling popcorn stared at them as they passed, her eyes unblinking. "You'll find what you lost," she said in a sing-song voice. "But you won't like what you find." Then she turned back to her machine, humming the same haunting tune as the guard. Julia felt dread coil tighter around her heart. Each step forward felt like sinking into quicksand. At the center of the park, they found a gate they hadn't seen before. Black iron, twisted into shapes of screaming faces. A sign above it read, "Funhouse closed for maintenance." Yet the gate creaked open when they approached. The iron gate yawned open on its own, the hinges shrieking like something alive. Julia hesitated, clutching Mark's arm. "Do we really go in there?" she whispered, but a distant echo Evan's voice, calling faintly, pulled them forward. Inside, The funhouse was a twisting labyrinth of mirrors and warped halls. Lights flickered with a sickly glow, and the floor seemed to slope subtly underfoot, making them feel dizzy. Their reflections warped in the mirrors, not playful distortions, but grotesque versions that sneered back at them. Sometimes the reflections moved just a beat too slow, or not at all. As they advanced, a chorus of whispers rose from the walls, voices overlapping, speaking in fragments. "Stay. He is ours. Turn back." Mark tried to convince himself it was a sound effect, but the fear clawed at his insides. They stumbled upon a room where an old carousel spun slowly. The horses were cracked and peeling, their glass eyes following the couple. Music played warped, off-key. A small shoe sat in the dust near the platform. Julia gasped. It was Evan's. Suddenly, the ride sped up, lights flaring, the horses screaming with metallic shrieks. They ran before the carousel could drag them in. They entered a hall lined with marionettes dangling from strings. Their wooden heads turned as Julia and Mark passed, joints creaking. One puppet, dressed like a park employee, whispered, "He's almost gone. Hurry." Then it went limp. At the end of the hall, they found a door marked with the park's mascot, a grinning jester. Julia pushed it open. The room beyond was massive and alive with pulsating light. In the center stood a massive mirror, black and shimmering. Shapes writhed behind its surface, shadowy figures that stretched and beckoned. Evan stood in front of it, eyes wide, as if entranced. "Evan!" Julia screamed. She bolted forward, but the shadows surged, forming hands that reached to drag the boy back. Mark hurled himself into the fray, tearing at the shapes. Julia grasped Evan, pulling with all her strength. The mirror let out a sound like cracking ice and shattered, sending them sprawling onto the cold floor. The shadows dissipated, the room empty and silent. Evan coughed, blinking up at them. "Mom? Dad?" he said weakly. They held him tight, sobbing with relief. Carrying Evan, they fled the funhouse. The gate behind them slammed shut, sealing with a hiss. The park had changed silent, deserted. The rides stood still, the music gone. The employees were nowhere to be seen. At the main gates, they found their car waiting. No one stopped them. As they drove away, the mist lifted, and the world felt real again. Julia looked back only once the park was gone. For the first week, everything seemed normal. Evan laughed, played, and clung to his parents. But Julia noticed little things. He asked for foods he had never liked before. His laugh carried an odd lilt. Mark brushed it off. Then, one evening, Julia froze. As Evan spoke with a strange accent, just for a word or two, her heart pounded. She studied his face. Something was off. Mark tried to calm her, but fear gnawed at both of them. And then, as Evan slept, Julia leaned close and whispered, "Did our son always have that freckle on his nose?"